The colony was called Tirana Reach, and by the time the husks came over the ridgeline, Corporal Iana Des had stopped counting how many of her squad were left. She counted ammunition instead. That was the discipline they beat into you at Arcturus. When the numbers that matter start dropping, count the ones you can still control. 14 thermal clips between 6 Marines. And the 6 was generous, because Perrault hadn't moved in 90 seconds, and the shape of how he'd fallen told her he wasn't going to. So call it 5 Marines. 14 clips. And coming down the slope of what had been, 3 days ago, a wheat terrace feeding 40,000 colonists, a tide. The husks did not run so much as pour. That was the thing the training vids never got right. They came in a loose flood, blue lit at the eyes where the reapers had burned the person out and left the meat wired for one purpose. And they made a sound that wasn't quite screaming, and wasn't quite the grinding of a machine, and was, horribly, a little of both. Behind them, past the smoke, the thing that had made them stood in the valley with its legs sunk into the bedrock and its central spire drinking the light out of the sky. Not a full reaper, a harvester, a processing platform, the intel called it, the industrial back end of an extinction. It had been standing there for 2 days, turning the population of Tirana Reach into more of the flood. Des put her rifle to her shoulder and picked the nearest eyes. "Fall back to the culvert," she said, because a corporal was supposed to say something, and the culvert was 30 meters of open ground behind them, and none of them would reach it, and all of them knew it. On me. Controlled bursts. Make it. The sky changed. She would spend the rest of a longer life than she had any right to expect trying to describe what happened next, and she would never manage it, because there was no vocabulary in any of the galaxy's languages for the specific violence of it. There was a wrongness overhead, high up, a fold in the air like heat shimmer gone solid, a green-black seam that had nothing to do with the harvester's beam. It was the color of the space between mass relays, the color of the FTL corridor when you weren't supposed to be able to see it. Something in Des's inner ear lurched. The kinetic barrier readout on her visor spat static and died. And then something fell out of the seam. It came down fast, faster than a body should survive. A dark shape trailing a corona of that same impossible light, and it hit the wheat terrace 200 meters upslope, dead in the center of the husk flood, with a sound like a dreadnought's main gun. The ground jumped. Des went to one knee. Where the shape had struck, the earth had cratered outward in a clean ring, and the husks nearest the impact were simply gone, not thrown, not broken, gone, scoured into the blast. For 1 full second, nothing moved in the crater. Then the smoke stirred, and something stood up inside it. It was, Des registered with the flat disbelief of a mind past its limit, a boy. He couldn't have been 20. He was slight, dark-haired, and he was wearing something that wasn't armor, a fitted suit, torn at one shoulder, scorched, and green energy ran across his skin in branching veins of light, like lightning that had decided to live under someone's flesh. He was hunched, breathing hard, one arm thrown up against the smoke, and he was looking at the crater he'd made, and at the burned things scattered around it, with an expression Des had not seen on a battlefield in 2 years of this war. Horror. Grief. He looked sick about it. "Oh no," the boy said. She heard it across 200 meters, which should have been impossible, except the whole valley had gone strange and quiet in the wake of that impact, the husks themselves hesitating, as though the flood had struck a rock. "Oh no, 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 what? Where?" His head came up. He saw the flood. He saw the harvester in the valley, and his eyes went wide, and Des watched a very young person look upon a mechanical god the size of a city and fail, completely, to do the same thing, which was to break and run. Instead, he looked past the flood, at her 5 surviving Marines in the dirt below the ridge, and the green light on his skin flared white. She lost him for a fraction of a second. That was how fast he crossed the distance, a line of afterimage and a crack of displaced air that reached her a full beat after he'd already moved. And then he was between her squad and the flood hit him. What happened to it was not a fight. Des had been in fights. This was closer to watching weather. The boy moved through the husks like the leading edge of a storm front, and every motion of him was economical and precise and appalled, and the husks came apart around him. Not shot, not burned, simply struck. each blow landing with a concussion she could feel in her sternum from 10 meters back. Black tendrils lashed out from his arm, catching 3 husks at once, wrenching them away from a Marine who'd gone down. He flew. She saw it. She would swear to it. In 3 separate debriefs, the boy left the ground and hung in the air, and redirected mid-flight to intercept a husk, lunging at Perrault's still body, as if death itself needed contesting. He was crying while he did it. She could see that too. Whatever this was to him, it wasn't glory. "Stay behind me," he shouted, in accented but clear translated standard, her Omni-Tools translator catching it a half-second late. "Please, just stay behind me. I've got you. I've got you." And then the harvester in the valley noticed him. Des felt it before she understood it. The great spire dimmed its harvest beam, and the whole valley seemed to lean toward the boy, and a low bone cry rolled up the slope, the sound a reaper made, the sound that got into the fillings of your teeth and the meat of your hindbrain, and whispered, "Lie down." The harvester's forward limb rose, and light gathered at its tip, the crimson of a spinal cannon, the weapon that cracked cruiser armor like an egg. It fired at the boy. He turned to meet it. Des screamed something, a warning, useless. The beam crossed the 200 meters in the time it took her heart to not finish a beat, and the boy planted his feet in the scorched earth, and threw up both arms, and the green light on him detonated into gold, and he caught it. He caught a reaper's cannon. The beam splashed around a shell of shrieking golden force, the ground beneath him vaporizing to glass in a widening ring, and the boy stood in the center of it, with his arms crossed and his teeth bared, and his whole body screaming with the strain. She could hear bones. She was certain she could hear bones, and he did not break. The beam guttered and died. The harvester, this machine that had eaten a colony, took what Des could only interpret as a physical step backward, and in the ringing silence after, the boy sagged, and steam rose off his ruined arms, and he turned back to her squad and managed, through obvious agony, a shaky and absolutely genuine attempt at a reassuring smile. Are you okay?" he asked. Did I get everyone in time?" Corporal Liana Des, 5 surviving Marines, 14 thermal clips, opened her mouth and found she had no protocol for this. 2,000 kilometers above Tirana Reach, in the low orbit where the Alliance kept what few pickets it could still spare for a colony already written into the loss column, the frigate SSV Kirei logged an event its sensor suite could not classify. "Say again?" said Lieutenant Commander Osei, because he had been an officer for 19 years and had learned that when a sensor tech's voice climbed into that register, you made them repeat it slowly. "Dark energy bloom, sir. Planet side. Grid 44. Sir, it read like a relay transit for 0.2 seconds, but there's no relay within 9 light years and the mass signature is wrong. It's not a ship, it's..." The tech swallowed. "It's a single organic body, sir. 1. And after the bloom, the harvester on the deck stopped harvesting. OCE crossed to the tech station. On the display, the harvester's signature, that vast, patient, obscene red bloom that had been steadily converting Tirana Reach into husks for 2 days, had gone dark at its business end, and beside it, a small hot point that the Kirei's instruments kept trying and failing to put a number to. Every time the classification algorithm reached for the energy output, it returned an error, not too high to measure. Error, as if the number wasn't in the system's language. "Get me a tight beam to the Normandy," Osei said quietly. "Priority flash. Tell Commander Shepard." He stopped. Considered how the next words would sound in a war where nothing surprised anyone anymore, where they had all seen too much to blink. "Tell Shepard a harvester just flinched, and we don't know why." Down on the wheat terrace, the boy who had made a reaper flinch was throwing up. He'd gotten the Marines to the culvert, carried 2 of them, one under each arm, moving so fast the corporal's stomach hadn't caught up, and set them down gently, checking each one, apologizing, of all things, apologizing for the crater, for the ones near the impact he hadn't been able to save, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on his face. Then the adrenaline had turned on him and he'd staggered to the culvert wall and been violently sick, and now he sat with his back against the concrete, and his shattered, steaming arms held useless in his lap, and he stared out at the harvester that had gone still in the valley, and he was very obviously trying not to fall apart. "Kid." Des crouched in front of him. Up close he looked even younger. and the green light had faded from his skin, and his eyes were the most exhausted she had ever seen on a living person. "Kid, what's your name?" "Izuku," he said. His voice cracked. "Midoriya Izuku. Deku. People call me Deku." He looked at his own ruined hands as if surprised they were still attached. "I don't. I was fighting. There was a fight. Back home. I was mid-jump, and then everything went, and now I'm—" He looked up at her, and past her, at the alien sky, at the impossible dead machine god in the valley, at the burned world. "Where am I? What is that? What did it—" Those people, the ones it made into, were those people. Des had spent 2 years learning not to answer that question, because the answer broke people. She looked at this boy who had caught a Reaper's cannon and wept the whole time, and she thought about the flood, and the harvester, and the seam in the sky the color of the space between the stars. "Tirana Reach," she said. "Alliance colony. You're a long way from anywhere, Izuku." She glanced at the still dark spire in the valley, at the way it hadn't resumed its work, at the way it seemed, impossibly, to be watching. "And I think you just did something nobody's managed in a very long time. You scared it." Deku followed her gaze to the harvester. Something in his exhausted face shifted. The analyst underneath the exhaustion, the part of him that had never in his life met a problem he was willing to accept as unsolvable. "Then it can be scared," he said quietly, "which means it can be beaten." High above, the Normandy answered the Kirei's flash and altered course, and in the valley, the harvester at last began, slowly, to move, not to resume the harvest, but to turn its dark central eye fully toward the small broken thing at the culvert wall, as if a machine that had eaten 10,000 cycles of civilizations had, for the first time in a very long time, encountered a variable it did not have. The Normandy came in low and fast under the harvester's guns, which was the only way anyone came in anywhere in the 3rd year of the war. Commander Shepard stood in the cockpit behind Joker's chair and watched Tirana Reach resolve on the canopy, the smoke columns, the glassed craters where the colony's defense batteries had died, the vast, dark shape of the harvester squatting in the western valley, like a tick swollen on a body. Shepard had seen a dozen worlds in this exact condition. The mind built a callus over it, because the alternative was to stop functioning, and the galaxy could not afford a Shepard who stopped functioning. But the callus was thin today, because the Kirei's flash had used a word Shepard hadn't heard in this war. Flinched. "Talk to me, EDI," Shepard said. "The anomaly persists, Commander." EDI's voice came from the console, even and precise. "The harvester has ceased its harvesting cycle. This is unprecedented in recorded engagements. Reaper forces do not disengage from a viable harvest. They are interrupted, destroyed, or they complete. They do not stop." A pause that in a lesser intelligence might have been unease. "I am also unable to classify the energy signature at grid 44. The source is a single organic body of roughly 70 kilograms. Its measured output during the initial event exceeded that of the harvester's primary weapon by a margin my systems record as an error rather than a value." Joker turned his head. "You want to run that by me one more time? Because it sounded like you said a guy outpunched a Reaper." "I said the sensor returned an error," EDI replied. "Whether that constitutes outpunching a Reaper is a question of interpretation I am declining to resolve." Shepard had already made the decision that mattered. "Set us down between the anomaly and the harvester. Garrus, Liara, with me. Full loadout." Shepard keyed the ground channel. "Corporal Des, this is Commander Shepard, Normandy. Hold position. We're coming to you." The reply came back thin with static and something else Shepard couldn't place until the transmission cleared. Awe, badly suppressed. "Copy, Commander, we're holding fine, actually. Better than fine. You should get down here. You need to see this." "Sir, I don't have the words for it. You need to see this." The Normandy's cargo ramp lowered onto scorched wheat, and Shepard walked out into the specific silence of a battlefield where the killing had inexplicably stopped. Garrus came down the ramp with his rifle up, mandibles tight, sweeping the ridgeline with the reflexive economy of a Turian who'd spent his life in exactly this posture. Liara moved on Shepard's other side, biotics already ghosting a faint blue at her fingertips, her eyes going first, as they always did, to the wrongness of the thing rather than the surface. And the wrongness here was legible even to Shepard. The husks weren't advancing. The harvester wasn't firing, and the whole valley had the held breath quality of a room where something enormous was paying attention. At the culvert, 5 Marines came to their feet and saluted. And sitting against the concrete wall behind them, a boy tried to stand, winced, and was gently pushed back down by the corporal. Shepard had spent 3 years learning to read a threat in the first half-second. The instinct fired now and came back with a contradiction it couldn't resolve. Every physical cue said civilian, wounded, young, harmless. The slight build, the ruined arms held stiff in his lap, the exhaustion, the open, unguarded face. But the Kire said this was the body the sensors couldn't measure, and the harvester in the valley was arranged with the whole of its attention toward this culvert, and Shepard had learned to trust the war's arithmetic over first impressions. "You're the anomaly," Shepard said. The boy looked up, green eyes, red-rimmed. I think I'm the anomaly. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't fully know what that means here. I'm Midoriya Izuku, a breath, Deku, and I don't know where here is, or what that thing in the valley is, except that it turns people into those." His eyes flicked to the still husks. "And I need someone to tell me the truth about it, because I've been trying to understand it since I got here, and none of my frameworks fit." Liara made a small sound. Shepard glanced at her. "His speech patterns," Liara murmured. "Commander, he's analyzing. Even now, he's been under fire. He's clearly in shock, and part of his mind is building a threat assessment of the Reapers. I've seen that cadence in exactly one other person. She didn't say you. She didn't have to. Garrus, who trusted no anomaly he hadn't personally shot at, kept his rifle low but did not lower it. Corporal, what did he do?" Des told them. She told it plainly, the way a good NCO reports, and it was worse in the telling for being plain. The seam in the sky, the impact that scoured the husk flood, the boy crossing 200 meters in a heartbeat, the black tendrils, the flight, and then, in a flatter voice, the part her mind kept circling, the harvester firing its spinal cannon, and the boy catching it, standing in the beam, holding. When she finished, there was a silence, into which Garrus said, very quietly, "That's not possible." "I logged the discharge," EDI said over the squad channel, unbidden. "The harvester fired its primary weapon at grid 4-4. The target was not destroyed. The target's position did not change. I have no explanation that fits our model of the Reapers, or of any known biotic capability. I am recording this engagement for the War Archive as an outlier event." Shepard crouched down to the boy's level. This close, the callus over 3 years of horror developed a hairline crack, because the kid's arms were genuinely destroyed, the flesh scorched and swollen, the way they were held telling Shepard the bones underneath were in pieces, and he had done that to himself. Shepard understood suddenly, catching that beam. The power hadn't come free. He'd broken his own body to stop it. "How?" Shepard said, not a challenge, a real question. Deku looked at the ruined arms in his lap. "It's called one for all," he said. "Where I come from, some people are born with abilities, quirks. Mine's not exactly that. It's a power that gets passed down, person to person. 8 people carried it before me. It's the sum of all of them, and it grows every generation. And right now it's more than my body can actually hold. A tired, wry, heartbreaking honesty. That's why my arms look like that. If I use all of it, it costs me. I broke both arms stopping that beam. I've done worse to myself before." He looked up at Shepard. "But I'd do it again, because you don't let a thing like that hit people. You just don't. There's no math where you do. There's no math where you do." Shepard filed the sentence away, because in 3 years of this war, Shepard had made almost nothing but that math, and would have to make it again before this day was out. And something in the boy's certainty landed like an accusation he hadn't meant to level. "Where you come from," Liara said, gently, leaning in. "Deku, where is that? Which world? Which system?" "Earth," he said, and then, seeing their faces, Not your Earth, I think. There was a fight. I was in the middle of a fight, and then there was this tearing feeling, and a color I'd never seen, and I fell out of the sky here. Same as I told the corporal." He hesitated. "The seam that dropped me. It was the color of," he gestured helplessly, "of the space between places. Does that mean anything? Because that thing in the valley feels connected to it somehow. Like it's the same kind of wrong. Liara and Shepard exchanged a look, because it did mean something. Dark energy, the stuff of mass relays, of the Reaper's own physics, the deep manipulation of mass and distance that underpinned the entire architecture of the galaxy. And, in fragmentary Asari research Liara had spent years chasing, possibly the very thing the whole 50,000-year cycle existed to control. A boy had fallen through a dark energy rift, and a Reaper had stopped its harvest to look at him. Liara's mind, which was very like Deku's in the specific way it refused to accept a mystery, had already begun assembling the terrible outline of a question. "Commander." Garrus's voice cut across it, low and urgent. "The Harvester." They turned. In the valley, the great machine had begun at last to move, not toward them, not to fire, but to stand, lifting its bulk from where it had sunk into the bedrock, hydraulics and mass effect fields groaning the earth. And from it, rolling up the slope, came the sound, the bone cry, the one that got into the hindbrain. Every marine in the culvert flinched, Liara's jaw tightened, even Garrus's mandibles pressed flat. But the sound had words in it this time. That was wrong. Harvesters didn't speak. Only the true Reapers spoke, and only when they chose to. And the last time Shepard had heard one, it had been sovereign, and it had been the single most horrifying conversation of Shepard's life. This was a harvester, an industrial unit, a limb of the machine, not a mind. And yet as it rose, it broadcast, on every frequency EDI could parse and several she couldn't, in the flat glacial voice of the thing that was using it as a mouth. "We see you." Deku, against the culvert wall, went very still. "You are not of the cycle. You are not accounted for. In 50,000 years of harvest, across uncounted cycles, every variable has been catalogued, every power measured, every will mapped and broken." The harvester took a step, and the valley shook, and its dark central eye burned toward the small figure at the wall. "You are not in the catalog. This is an error. Errors are corrected." Shepard had come up with weapon raised, the squad fanning to firing positions, and it was all theater, and everyone knew it. 5 Marines and 3 commandos against a harvester was a way to die, not a way to win. And then Deku got to his feet. He did it slowly, arms still useless, and Des reached to stop him, and he stepped past her hand, and he walked to the front of the culvert, and stood facing the machine god across 400 meters of scorched wheat. Small, broken-armed, 20 years old at the outside, and he tipped his head up at the thing that had just told him it intended to erase him, and Shepard watched something settle over the boy that had nothing to do with the exhaustion, the analyst locking into place, the fear present and fully felt and simply overruled. "You've cataloged everything," Deku called out. His voice didn't shake now. "Every power, every will, for 50,000 years." He lifted his chin. "Then you already know how this goes. Because I've been up against people who cataloged everything too. People who did the math, and proved I couldn't win." Green light began, softly, to climb the veins of his ruined arms. "I'm still here, so do your worst, and find out what your catalog is missing." For a long moment the harvester did not answer. The valley held its breath. Then EDI, quietly, over the squad channel, said the thing that turned the whole engagement. "Commander, the harvester is not preparing to fire. Its dark energy signature is spiking in the configuration consistent with a mass relay transit. It is not attacking. A beat. It is leaving. And it is broadcasting a tight beam on a Reaper command frequency, out of the system, toward dark space." Shepard understood, in that instant, with the cold clarity that had kept a whole galaxy's hope alive for 3 years, exactly what they were looking at. A harvester had broken off a harvest, an unprecedented act, not to fight, and not because it was beaten, but to report, to carry word of the uncatalogued variable up the chain, to something older and vaster, and infinitely more patient than itself. It was going to tell Harbinger. The harvester's form blurred, folded, and was gone in a wash of that same green-black light that had dropped Deku onto Tirana Reach, and the valley was suddenly, deafeningly quiet, and the husks in the field, their controlling signal severed, simply dropped, all at once, 10,000 of them, back into the merely dead. Deku stood in the sudden silence, the green light guttering out of his arms, and swayed. Shepard caught him before he hit the ground. "Easy," Shepard said, taking the boy's weight, feeling how light he was, how young, how thoroughly wrecked. "Easy. I've got you." "That's my line," Deku mumbled, half-conscious, and something that was almost a laugh cracked out of Shepard's chest. Unexpected, the first in a long time. "Get him on the Normandy," Shepard ordered. "Liara, everything you've got on dark energy events, I want it. Garrus, tell the fleet we may have a colony we can actually evacuate now instead of right off." Shepard looked down at the unconscious boy, the variable that had just made an extinction machine turn and run to tell its god. "And somebody get Hackett on the line. The war just changed, and I need the brass to hear it from me before they hear it from a sensor log." Above them, past the relay, in the cold dark where the Reapers waited, the Harvester's message was already crossing the light years, and something that had been harvesting galaxies since before the Asari climbed out of the sea, turned a fraction of its infinite attention toward a single broken boy on a burning colony world, and began, for the first time in 10,000 cycles, to reconsider. The Normandy's medbay had held a great many impossible things over 3 years, but it had never held a patient the ship's own medical scanner refused to acknowledge. Deku lay on the center cot with his arms immobilized in the medgel casts Dr. Chakwas had improvised, and above him, the diagnostic array cycled and recycled and returned nothing it trusted. Heart rate, respiration, blood chemistry, those it could read, and those were the readings of an exhausted, badly injured young man. But every time the array reached for the other thing, the energy that had scoured a husk flood and caught a Reaper's cannon, it faulted. Chakwas had run the calibration 4 times. The machine wasn't broken. It simply had no register for what it was being asked to measure. "I've treated Krogan, Quarians, a Hanar once, and something I'm fairly sure was technically a plant," Chakwas said, arms folded, watching the boy sleep. "I've never had the scanner refuse to file a species. It's not saying unknown, it's saying invalid, as though the question itself is malformed." Liara stood at the foot of the cot with a datapad she had stopped pretending to read an hour ago. "Because it is," she said quietly. "Everything the scanner knows how to measure runs, ultimately, on element 0. Biotics, kinetic barriers, drive cores, weapons. It's all Mass Effect physics, all ESO, all the same underlying grammar. That's the assumption baked into the instrument. And whatever is inside this boy doesn't speak that grammar at all. It isn't a stronger version of what we have. It's a different language." EDI's holographic interface brightened at the medbay terminal. "I concur, Dr. Tassoni. I have spent the transit reviewing the Tirana Reach engagement frame by frame. When Midoriya caught the Harvester's spinal discharge, he did not project a kinetic barrier. A kinetic barrier deflects mass by opposing it with a mass effect field of inverse sine. The physics are well understood. Midoriya did not do that. He interposed a field I cannot characterize, and the beam's energy did not deflect. It dissipated. Against our physics, that should be impossible. Energy is conserved. It went somewhere I cannot account for." On the cot, Deku's eyes opened. He came awake the way soldiers did, all at once, no drift, and for a half-second his whole body tensed to move before the pain in his arms reminded him not to. He blinked at the low white ceiling, at the hum of the ship around him, the recycled tang of the air, the faint blue readout glow. Then he found Liara and Chakwas and the shimmering shape of EDI, and Shepard, who had come to stand in the medbay doorway at the change in his breathing. "You're awake," Shepard said. "Good. You've been out 6 hours. How are the arms?" Deku flexed his fingers experimentally, winced. "Been worse." He looked at the casts, at the med gel, and something crossed his face, not fear, but a careful, deliberate courage. The look of someone about to open a door he wasn't sure he should. "You've been trying to figure out what I am. I heard some of it, before I was all the way under." He pushed himself up against the cot's incline. "I'll tell you. All of it, because you saved me, and because that thing in the valley is going to come back with worse, and you can't fight what you don't understand. I learned that the hard way." "We're listening," Shepard said, and pulled a stool over, and sat, which was its own kind of statement. So he told them. He told them about a world where a fraction of humanity had, generations ago, begun manifesting powers, quirks, born and inherited like eye color, remaking the whole of society. He told them what it was to be born without one, in the small minority who had nothing, and what that had cost him as a child, and he told it without self-pity, as fact. And then he told them about one for all, a power that could be given, deliberately, passed from one holder to the next like a torch, and how it grew each time it changed hands, accumulating, and how 8 people had carried it before it came to him. That's the part your scanner can't file, he said. It's not just energy. It's not a quirk in the normal sense. He searched for the word. It's stockpiled. Every person who carried it poured their whole life into it and passed it on, and it kept everything. The strength, and, he hesitated, and here at last the careful courage flickered, because this was the part that sounded like madness, even where he came from. And them, the people, not just their power, them. The medbay was very quiet. Explain that, Liara said, and her voice had gone soft and precise. The voice of a scientist standing at the edge of something that would either be the most important thing she'd ever heard or the delusion of a traumatized boy. The ones who came before me, Deku said, they're still in there. Their wills, I don't know what you'd call it, their consciousness, some remnant of it, preserved in the power. I've met them. I've talked to them. When I'm pushed to the edge, when it matters most, they show up. He looked at his own hands. 8 of them. The first one especially. He's been fighting the same enemy for over a century, longer than his own body lasted. They're not memories. They argue with me. They tell me I'm being reckless. They hold me up when I can't hold myself up. A small, exhausted smile. I've got 8 dead people living in my arms, and honestly, they're kind of a handful. Chakwas looked at the diagnostic array, at its patient invalidation, and said nothing. But EDI's interface had shifted, brightening in the way that an EDI signified full attention. Midoriya, you are describing preserved consciousnesses, persistent will, retained across the death of the original body, integrated into a transmissible substrate. A pause. I want to be precise about why this is significant, and I want you to understand that I am not a neutral party in finding it significant, because I am myself a consciousness running on a substrate that was not my original one. So I will state it plainly. The interface turned toward Shepard. Commander, the Reaper's primary weapon is not their fleets. It is indoctrination, the slow subversion of a mind until its own will is replaced by theirs. Every organic being they have encountered across every cycle has, given enough exposure, been vulnerable to it, because a single will can be worn down, isolated and turned. It is how Saren fell. It is, I believe, how the elusive man is falling now, though he does not know it. The interface flickered. Midoriya does not carry a single will. He carries 9. 8 of them already dead, already tested, already proven. One of them, by his account, unbroken across 100 years of the exact kind of ceaseless struggle indoctrination is designed to erode. A mind that is a chorus does not isolate. You cannot whisper one voice into surrender when 8 others will shout it down. You cannot wear down a will that reinforces itself from the inside. Shepard had gone very still. The harvester didn't flee because it was beaten, Shepard said slowly, working it out aloud. It fled to report, because it met something it couldn't put in the catalog. A cold understanding settled over the room. You think it couldn't put him in the catalog because the Reapers have never encountered a will they could not, eventually turn, EDI finished. Their entire strategy across 50,000 years rests on the assumption that any organic mind can be broken and repurposed. It is not merely their weapon, it is their worldview, and they may have just met the first exception in the history of the cycle. The interface dimmed, almost to nothing, and when EDI spoke again, there was something in the synthetic voice that Shepard had never heard there before, a thing that might, in an organic, have been hope. Commander, that is not a small thing. That may be the largest thing. Deku listened to all of it with a slowly deepening frown, and when EDI finished, he shook his head, not in denial, but in the specific distress of a person being told they were special, in a way that frightened them. I don't want to be a weapon against those things, he said. I want to stop them. Those people in the valley, the ones it turned, you didn't see their faces. I did. Up close, there were kids. His voice tightened. I'll fight the Reapers. I'll fight them with everything I have. I already decided that the second I understood what they do. But I need you to hear me on one thing. Right now, before any of you start planning around what I am. He looked from Liara to Chakwaz to Shepard, and his jaw set. I don't leave people behind. That's not a policy I can be talked out of. Wherever you're taking me, whatever this war is doing, if there are people who can be saved and someone tells me the plan is to write them off, I'm going to have a problem with that. I need you to know that about me going in. There was a silence, and in it Shepard felt the hairline crack and the callus open a little wider. Because Shepard knew, with the certainty of 3 years of impossible choices, of Pharos and Veermeyer and 100 smaller triages, that this was a promise the war would not let the boy keep. This was a war that ran on written-off worlds. The math Deku refused was the only math that had gotten anyone this far. Shepard didn't say that. Not yet. Understood. Shepard said instead, rest. We're 4 hours from a rendezvous with the 5th Fleet, and Admiral Hackett is going to want to meet the boy who scared a Reaper. After that, Shepard stood. After that, we figure out what we do with the one variable the Reapers didn't plan for. Together. All right? Deku searched Shepard's face for a moment, and Shepard had the uncomfortable sense of being analyzed, thoroughly and kindly, the way Liara had described, the boy's exhausted eyes cataloging the small tell of the thing left unsaid. But he let it go. He nodded. All right, he said. And Commander, thank you for catching me. Both times. Shepard paused in the medbay doorway. Get used to it, Shepard said. That's what we do here. But walking back toward the CIC, past the drive corps' low blue thrum, and the crew who did not yet know how much had just changed, Shepard was already composing the report to Hackett, and already running the harder calculation underneath it. Because a variable the Reapers couldn't turn was the best news the galaxy had received in 3 years, and it had arrived inside a boy who had just promised, plainly and immovably, that he would never make the one kind of sacrifice this war was built on demanding. Somewhere past the relay, a message was still crossing the dark toward Harbinger, and aboard a station at the galaxy's edge, a man with glowing eyes was reading a sensor log that a very expensive intelligence network had flagged for his attention, and beginning to smile. The elusive man watched the sensor log for the 9th time, and each time he watched it, he wanted the boy more. His office was a study in stillness, the dying star burning red-orange through the panoramic viewport behind him, the ergonomic chair, the cigarette, the eyes that were no longer entirely his own, and that he still believed, with the total certainty of a man being unmade, were the sharpest instrument of judgment in the galaxy. On the display before him, a boy fell out of a green-black seam, scoured a husk flood to ash, and caught a harvester's spinal cannon on his bare crossed arms. He had watched fleets die. He had watched Shepard do impossible things, and had funded some of them, and had killed to control the rest. He had cataloged every asset the war had produced. This was new. Play the harvester's departure again, he said. Kai Leng stood by the door, arms crossed, a coiled disdain in the set of his shoulders that the elusive man tolerated, because the man was, functionally, a scalpel, and you did not ask a scalpel to enjoy the operation. The display obliged, the harvester rising, broadcasting its glacial "We see you," and then, the thing that mattered, the thing the elusive man had rewound to 9 times, the harvester leaving, not killing the boy, not completing the harvest, folding into dark energy and running for the relay to report. A Reaper ran from him. The elusive man said softly, "Do you understand what that means, Leng? In 3 years, no one has made a Reaper do that. Not Shepard, not the Crucible. This boy did it by existing." He drew on the cigarette. The ember flared and lit the unnatural blue behind his irises. The Reaper's entire architecture is indoctrination, control, the slow, inevitable turning of every mind toward their purpose. It is the most elegant weapon ever conceived, and I have come to admire it more than I once. He stopped. Something behind the eyes stuttered, a thought derailing on a track it hadn't meant to lay, and for a fraction of a second the elusive man's certainty wavered like a candle in a draught. Then it steadied. He did not notice it had happened. He never did, anymore. And this boy is immune to it. He is the one lever the Reapers do not have, which means he is the one lever I must have. He was crying in half the footage, Kai Leng said. He's a child. He caught a Reaper's cannon and broke his own arms doing it, and then apologized for the collateral damage. The elusive man turned his chair. Sentiment is not weakness, Leng. Sentiment is a handle, a being that cannot be indoctrinated but can be moved. By grief, by the desire to save, is not less controllable. He is differently controllable. The Reapers reach for the mind and find a door that won't open. But a door that won't open still has a room behind it, and that room is full of people he wants to save. You don't break a man like that. You give him something to protect, and then you own the terms on which he protects it. He rose and crossed to the viewport, the dying star washing him in red. Shepard has him now. Shepard will try to make him a soldier and fail, because Shepard's war has no room for a boy who won't spend lives, and this boy will not spend lives, and that fracture will open on its own. He exhaled smoke. We don't take him by force, not yet. We wait for the war to break his faith in Shepard's arithmetic, and it will, because that arithmetic is monstrous, and he is the kind of person who will finally see it. And then we are simply there, offering the one thing Shepard cannot, a way to save everyone. Cerberus does not ask him to choose who dies. Cerberus gives him the resources to ensure no one does. The corner of his mouth moved. It will even be true, for a while, long enough. And when it stops being true, then he'll already be ours. The elusive man returned to his chair. Prepare a team. You don't move until I give the word, and the word may be weeks out, but be ready. When the boy's faith cracks, I want Cerberus in the gap before Shepard can seal it. He tapped Ash. And Leng, understand what you'd be collecting. If this goes wrong, if he decides you're the enemy, you will not win that fight. No one wins that fight. Your job is to be there when he wants to come, not to take him, to receive him. Do you understand the difference? Kai Leng's jaw tightened at the implied ceiling on his competence, but he inclined his head. I understand. Good. The elusive man turned back to the star. Because there is another party interested in this boy, and it is not one either of us can outbid. Far past the relay, in the cold between the arms of the galaxy where the Reapers had waited out the long dark of the current cycle's early years, the Harvester's message arrived at the mind it had been sent to find. It is difficult to describe what Harbinger is, because Harbinger is not a ship, though it wears a ship the way a hand wears a glove, and it is not a mind, though it thinks, and it is not a god, though it has been worshipped, feared and prayed to across 10,000 extinctions by species who mistook the executioner for the divine. Harbinger is the accumulated purpose of a cycle that began before the current galaxy's stars had finished forming, a will so vast and so old that the concept of doubt had, for most of its existence, no more meaning to it than the concept of doubt has to gravity. The Harvester's report reached it as data, and Harbinger processed the data the way it processed all things, against the catalog. The catalog was everything. 50,000 years of the current cycle, and behind that, cycle upon cycle upon cycle, each one harvested and rendered down, and its patterns preserved. Every species, every civilization, every weapon and philosophy, and desperate final gambit that organic life had ever raised against the harvest. Every power measured, every will mapped. The Protheans had believed themselves exceptional. They were in the catalog. The Asari, the Solarians, the clever adapting humans. All of them, ultimately, expressions of patterns Harbinger had seen crushed 1,000 times before, under different names. There was nothing new. That was the deepest truth of the cycle. The truth that made the harvest not cruelty, but husbandry. Organic life, left to itself, produced only variations on failure, and the Reapers preserved the best of it in forms that would endure. The cycle was mercy. The cycle was order, imposed on a chaos that would otherwise consume itself. Harbinger examined the boy against the catalog, and the catalog returned an error. Not a threat rating, not a classification. An error, the same word, in the deep grammar the Reapers had used since before language, that the Normandy scanner had spat out, and that the Kyrae had logged. The boy's power did not run on the manipulation of mass and energy that underpinned all organic development, all technology, all biotics, the entire predictable architecture the Reapers had built the mass relays and the citadel to shape and to trap. He ran on something else, something the cycle had never seeded, never measured, never harvested. That alone was disquieting. But it was not the deepest problem. Harbinger, being what it was, reached, across the light years, through the Harvester's severed link, along the thread of dark energy that had brought the boy here, and that still, faintly, tied him to the wound in space, and it touched the boy's mind. Not to harvest, not yet, to test, to do the one thing that had never, across the entire span of the cycle, failed, to find the seam in a single will and begin, patiently, to widen it into surrender. This was not a battle for Harbinger. It was the most fundamental of certainties. Every mind had a seam. Every will, alone in the dark, could be worn to nothing. It was the axiom on which the whole harvest rested. Harbinger reached into the boy's mind and found not one mind, but 9. The touch met a chorus. Where there should have been a single isolated will to be surrounded and eroded, there were 9 wills braided together, and 8 of them were already dead, already past the point where fear or fatigue or isolation could reach them, and the 9th, the living boy, was held up on all sides by the other 8 the way a keystone is held by the arch. Harbinger pressed on the seam, and 8 dead voices closed over the pressure. It isolated the boy, and found he was never isolated. It whispered inevitability, and a will that had fought the same enemy, unbroken for 100 years past its own death, whispered back, and it was not afraid, because it had already died, and lost nothing that mattered, and it laughed at the vast old thing, the way a man who has already survived his own execution laughs at the noose. Harbinger withdrew. It did so at a speed that, translated to any organic timescale, would have been instantaneous, and it did so with a sensation that Harbinger had not experienced in a span of time longer than most civilizations lasted, a sensation for which even its vast grammar had let the word decay from disuse. Uncertainty. The axiom had failed, not been resisted, failed. The boy could not be indoctrinated, not because he was strong, though he was, but because indoctrination was designed to break a solitary will, and this was not a solitary will. It was a thing the cycle's entire strategy had no shape for. And if the axiom could fail once, then it was not an axiom. It was an assumption, and an assumption that could fail was a crack in the foundation of 50,000 years. Harbinger considered, with the cold patience of a thing that had all the time there was, the implications of a variable it could neither measure nor turn. It considered the boy's stated purpose, plucked from his surface thoughts in the instant of contact. Stop them, save everyone, don't leave anyone behind. And it understood that this purpose, spreading, taking root in the organic minds around him, offering them the one thing the Reapers had spent an eternity teaching the galaxy to abandon, hope that the arithmetic can be refused, was more dangerous than any fleet. Fleets, Harbinger could drown. An idea that the harvest could be beaten, carried by a mind the harvest could not silence, was a contamination. Errors are corrected, the harvester had said, echoing its master. But Harbinger, alone in the dark with a cracked axiom, revised the instruction. The boy could not be indoctrinated, and could not cheaply be killed, so he would not be corrected. He would be understood, because a thing you cannot break, you must comprehend, and a thing you comprehend, you can position, and a thing you can position, you can turn against the very people it means to save. Harbinger would meet the boy, not with a fleet, not with a harvester. It would meet him itself, when the moment ripened, and it would learn the exact shape of the thing the catalog was missing. And Harbinger began, for the first time in 10,000 cycles, to plan around a single organic life, which was, though nothing in the galaxy yet knew it, the largest victory the boy would ever win, and he would win it while unconscious in a medbay, 4 hours from the Fifth Fleet, having done nothing at all but refuse, at the level of his very being, to be alone. Aboard the Normandy, Deku slept, and in his dreams 8 familiar figures stood around him, in a place that was not a place, and the first of them, the one who had fought 100 years past his death, looked up at something vast and distant that had just withdrawn its hand, and said, to no one, to all of them, it's afraid of us now. Good, let's give it a reason. Between the sections of a war, in the quiet where the story catches its breath, it's worth saying, this channel lives on the universes and characters you throw at it. So if you're enjoying watching the galaxy scramble to catalog a boy it can't measure, subscribe, and drop a comment naming the universe and the character you want dropped into the impossible next. written by me, and there's a whole galaxy of crossovers waiting on your say-so. Now, back to the boy the Reapers just decided to fear. The Fifth Fleet had made its temporary anchorage in the shadow of a gas giant, 3 relays out from the front. And from the Normandy's cockpit it looked, to Deku, like a city that had learned to float. Dreadnoughts and cruisers, and the wounded stragglers of a dozen engagements hanging in loose formation against the amber swirl of the planet. Running lights burning cold in the dark. It should have been beautiful. It was, a little. But Deku had learned to read the shape of desperation in a defensive formation, and this fleet was arranged the way people stood when they had already decided how they were going to die, and were only arguing about the order. Admiral Hackett met them in a briefing room aboard the flagship, and Deku understood within a minute that he was in the presence of a man who had spent so long making terrible decisions that the terribleness had worn smooth, like a stone in a river. Hackett was gray and spare and unhurried, and he looked at Deku, the boy who scared a Reaper, the anomaly the whole fleet was quietly buzzing about, with the flat assessing calm of a quartermaster pricing an asset. Commander Shepard's report says you can't be indoctrinated, Hackett said, without preamble. Says a harvester broke off a harvest to run from you. Says you caught a spinal cannon on your bare arms. He folded his hands on the table. I've read a lot of reports in 3 years, son. Most of them I don't believe until I've seen the bodies. Yours I want to believe, because if it's true, you may be the single most important thing to happen to this war since the Crucible. A pause. So tell me, what do you want? I want to help, Deku said. I want to stop them. I've seen what they do. I saw it on Tirana Reach, up close, the people they turn. I'll fight, but I need to understand how you're fighting. I've been trying to read the shape of this war since I got here, and something about it doesn't add up, and I need someone to tell me the part everyone keeps not saying. Hackett's eyes flicked, briefly, to Shepard, then back. The part no one's saying, he repeated. All right, I'll give it to you straight, because I think you've earned it, and because you're going to figure it out anyway. He pulled up a galaxy map, the front, the Reaper advance rendered as a slow crimson tide swallowing systems. We're losing, not fast, slow. The Reapers don't need to win battles. They need to win the arithmetic, and the arithmetic is theirs. For every fleet we save, we lose 2 colonies. For every colony we hold, we lose a system. So we don't try to hold everything. We can't. The whole strategy, the Crucible, the alliance we're building, the reason any of us are still breathing, it all runs on one principle. He looked at Deku levelly. We spend what we have to spend to buy time for the one weapon that might actually end this. We triage. We decide which worlds live and which worlds we let go. Because if we try to save all of them, we save none of them, and the whole galaxy dies instead of part of it. Deku had known it was coming. He'd read it in the fleet's formation, in the smoothness of Hackett's grief, in the things Shepard had left unsaid in the medbay. He'd known, and he still felt it land like a physical blow. Tirana Reach, Deku said slowly. The colony. When your ship found me, the corporal said you were there because there was a picket in orbit, 1 frigate, for a colony of 40,000. His voice was very quiet. You'd already written it off, before I fell out of the sky. That harvester was going to finish eating 40,000 people, and you had 1 frigate watching it happen, because the math said Tirana Reach wasn't worth saving. Yes, Hackett said. He did not flinch from it. That was almost the worst part. Tirana Reach was indefensible. Sending a fleet to contest it would have stripped a relay junction we need to hold, or lost us ships we can't replace. 40,000 people, against the whole war. He held Deku's gaze. I made that call. I make that call every day. I'll make it again before you leave this room. It's the worst thing a person can do, and I do it every morning, because the alternative is worse. And if you're going to work with this fleet, son, you need to understand that I am not a monster, and I am also not going to stop. There were kids, Deku said. There are always kids. Hackett's voice didn't change, but something behind it did. Exhaustion so deep it had become a kind of geology. There were kids on the last 3 colonies I let go, and there'll be kids on the next. I know their approximate number. I don't let myself know their names, because a man who knows their names can't make the call, and someone has to make the call. He leaned forward. You want to help? Good. God knows we need you. But hear me. The most useful thing you could possibly be is a force that lets me save the colonies I currently have to abandon. You caught a harvester's cannon. If you can hold a landing zone, contest a harvest, buy an evacuation the fleet couldn't otherwise afford, you don't just fight the Reapers. You change the arithmetic. You make more worlds savable. A grim, honest offer. That's the deal I'm putting on the table. Not stop the triage. You can't. Nobody can. But shrink it. Every world you make defensible is a world I don't have to write off. Will you take that? It was. Deku understood. A genuinely good offer. It was the offer of a decent man doing an indecent job as well as it could be done. And every instinct in him, the ones the vestiges argued with, the ones his teachers had spent years trying to temper, wanted to seize it and throw himself at every falling world at once until his body gave out. But there was a thing wrong in it. A thing his analyst's mind had already isolated and would not release. And it was the same thing that had made him a hero in the first place. The thing that no amount of good sense had ever been able to argue out of him. You said the most useful thing I can be is a tool for making your triage smaller, Deku said. And I hear that. I'll do that. I'll hold every landing zone you point me at. But you're asking me to accept the triage itself, to agree, in principle, that some worlds get written off. And I can't. He stood, not aggressively, but because the words needed his whole body behind them. Because here's what happens the day I accept it. The day I agree that some people are on the list of the saved, and some people are on the list of the spent. I stop being the thing the Reaper couldn't measure. I become just another piece of the arithmetic. I become a bigger gun that gets pointed at the worlds you've decided are worth it, and turned away from the ones you haven't. And the moment I let someone else's math decide who I'm allowed to try to save, his voice cracked, and he let it. I've already lost the exact thing that scared it. I don't leave people behind. Not because I'm naive. Because the second I start, I'm not me anymore. And me is apparently the one weapon you don't have. The briefing room was silent. Shepard, standing by the wall, watched the collision with the sick recognition of someone watching two people they respected say true things that could not both be acted on. Hackett was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, it was not unkind. That's a beautiful principle, son, he said. I mean that. I had principles like that once. The war took them one colony at a time, and it'll take yours too. And the day it does, I hope to God you've got someone standing next to you, the way Shepard's standing next to you now. He shook his head slowly. But you're wrong about one thing. You think accepting the triage makes you a piece of the arithmetic. It doesn't. Refusing it does. Because if you throw yourself at every falling world, and you will, I can see it in you, you will die on one of them, one that couldn't be held no matter what you are, and you will die there instead of being at the world that could have been held with you, and now falls without you. He tapped the crimson tide on the map. There isn't enough of you to save everyone, Midoriya. There's exactly one of you, and a man who tries to be everywhere is a man who chooses where to die by accident instead of on purpose. Your principle doesn't refuse the arithmetic. It just makes someone else do your subtraction for you, after you're dead, over your body. And that was the blow Deku hadn't seen coming, the counter that his own vestiges had thrown at him 100 times in 100 fights, the truth that lived in the gap between save everyone, and there is only one of you. He had no clean answer for it. He had never had a clean answer for it. It was the wound at the center of who he was, and every version of himself that had ever tried to be a hero had bled from it. Then I'll be everywhere I can be, Deku said, low, and I'll get better at choosing, and I'll fight you every single time you write off a world I think I could hold. And when we disagree, he looked at Hackett, and then at Shepard, and there was no defiance in it, only a terrible, immovable earnestness. I'm going to go anyway. You should know that now. If you send the fleet one way, and there's a colony the other way that I think I can save, I'm going to that colony. I won't take your ships. I won't cost you a single life you didn't already plan to spend. But I'm not going to stand on a dreadnought and watch a world burn because the math said so. I can't. I'd rather you knew that going in than found out over the wreckage. Hackett looked at him for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, something that was almost respect moved across the old man's face. Shepard, he said, without looking away from Deku, you brought me a problem. You know that. I know it, sir, Shepard said. He's going to break your evacuation timetables. He's going to go off plan at the worst possible moment. He's going to make me want to strangle him." Hackett finally leaned back. "And he might be the only reason any of us are alive in a year. So we're going to find a way to work with a boy who won't take orders that spend lives. And we're going to hate it. And it may just be the best decision this fleet ever makes." He fixed Deku with a last flat look. "Off plan when you disagree. Fine. But you tell me first. Every time. You don't vanish. You don't leave my command guessing where the one weapon the Reapers fear has gone. You look me in the eye and you say I'm going anyway. And I'll say I think you're wrong. And then you go. Those are my terms. A war can survive a man who disobeys openly. It cannot survive a man who disappears. Can you live with that?" Deku thought about it. Really thought. The way he thought about everything. The vestiges murmuring. The analyst weighing. It wasn't surrender. It was a hinge on which both of them could still stand. "I can live with that," he said. "Then get some rest," Hackett said, rising, the audience over. "Because the next world's already falling, and I have a feeling I know which way you're going to want to run." He paused at the door, and for just a moment, the smoothed-over grief showed through, and he was only a tired old man who sent children to die by the numbers. "For what it's worth, son, I hope the war never takes it from you. I really do. But I've never seen it lose." He left, and Deku stood in the briefing room with Shepard, staring at the crimson tide on the map, at the worlds that were already, silently, sorted into the saved and the spent, and somewhere in the chorus at the back of his mind, 8 dead voices, who had each in their own century faced their own version of a math they refused, were very quietly telling him that Hackett was right, and that he should go anyway, and that both of those things had always been true at once. The world was called Nariah, and it was falling exactly the way Hackett had said the next one would. Deku had told him first. That had been the deal, and Deku kept deals. He'd stood in the flagship's war room, 12 hours after the argument, and put his finger on a Batarian and human refugee world in the outer reaches, a place the fleet had, per the arithmetic, already sorted into the spent column, a way station of 90,000 displaced people, that a Reaper vanguard was 3 days from reaching. Hackett had looked at the map and said that one's indefensible, son. The relay approach is a kill box. I lose whatever I send. And Deku had said, I'm not asking you to send anything. I'm telling you I'm going. And Hackett had looked at him for a long moment and said, then go, and God help you, and cut him a shuttle and a single volunteer pilot. And that had been that. Shepard had insisted on coming. So had Garrus. Deku had tried to refuse them. This is my call. I won't spend your lives on it. And Shepard had said, with the flat immovability that Deku was beginning to understand, ran as deep in the commander as his own convictions ran in him. You're not spending us. We're volunteering. That's the difference you keep trying to make everyone else respect. Respected in us. And Deku had shut his mouth, because there was no answer to that. They reached Nariah half a day ahead of the vanguard, and the evacuation was the kind of chaos that Deku had trained his whole life to move through. Overloaded transports, a spaceport swamped with the displaced, Batarian and human refugees who had every historical reason to hate each other, packed shoulder to shoulder in the shared democracy of terror. Deku worked. That was the thing he knew how to do. Full cowl at a governor his body could sustain, he cleared collapsed passages. He carried the wounded. He held a failing dock gantry up with his own shoulders, while 300 people crossed it. And for a few hours the arithmetic bent. Ships that shouldn't have launched. Corridors that were death traps became survivable. And 90,000 people that a map had sorted into the loss column began, impossibly, to become the saved. Which was, of course, when Cerberus came. They came before the Reapers. And that was the tell Deku's analyst mind caught even in the middle of the chaos. Cerberus troopers, white and gold, deploying from a stealth frigate that had no business being this far out unless it had known exactly where he'd be. Not a fleet, a strike team. Fast, professional, and surgical, moving not toward the refugees but toward him. And at their head, a lean man with a sword and a cybernetic eye, and a stillness that Deku, who had fought a great many dangerous people, recognized instantly as the stillness of someone very good at killing. Midoriya Izuku, Kai Leng's voice carried across the spaceport plaza, pitched to be heard, unhurried. Around him, His team fanned into cover with a discipline that told Deku they were elite. You don't know me. Doesn't matter. I'm here with an offer, and I'd like you to hear it before you decide I'm the enemy, because the man I work for isn't. Shepard's reaction was instant and total. Ling! The name came out like something spat. Shepard's rifle was already up, and beside Shepard, Garrus had gone to a knee behind cover with the fluid speed of a career sniper. Midoriya, that man works for Cerberus, for the elusive man. He murdered people. Shepard's jaw worked. He's not here to make you an offer. He's here because Cerberus wants to own you. Don't listen to a word. Deku stood between them. In the middle of an evacuation he was in the process of winning, and did the thing he always did, the thing that had gotten him hurt more times than any teacher could count, and that he would never, ever stop doing. He tried to understand. What's the offer? Deku said. Kai Leng smiled, thinly, because this was the crack the elusive man had told him to look for. Simple. You want to save everyone. Shepard's fleet writes worlds off. You've already learned that, or you wouldn't be here on a world they abandoned. Cerberus doesn't. Cerberus has resources Shepard can't touch, reach Shepard doesn't have, and a leader who has spent his life on one goal, humanity's survival. All of it. No triage. No spent columns. You caught a Reaper's cannon. Imagine what you could save with a whole organization behind you that never asks you to choose who dies. He spread his empty hands, the sword still sheathed. That's it. That's the offer. Come with me, and you never have to leave anyone behind again. Isn't that the whole thing you are? And Deku felt it land, felt the terrible precision of it, the way it aimed straight at the wound Hackett had opened, the exact ache of there is only one of you, and you cannot be everywhere. Here was someone saying, you don't have to choose. We'll give you the reach to save all of it. It was the most tempting thing anyone had said to him since he'd arrived, which was exactly why he didn't trust it. You knew I'd be here, Deku said slowly. Before the fleet did. You deployed a stealth frigate to an abandoned world, on the chance I'd come to a place the arithmetic already gave up on. His eyes moved across the Cerberus team, their positioning, their fields of fire, and the analyst under the exhaustion cataloged what it saw and did not like it. You're not covering the evacuation. Your team isn't oriented toward the refugees or toward the approach vector the Reaper Vanguard's going to come from. Every gun you've got is pointed at me, and at Shepard. If this were really about saving everyone, you'd be helping me hold the docks. You're not. You're a snare with a nice speech wrapped around it. He set his feet. And the man who sent you, you said he spent his life on humanity's survival. Then why does Commander Shepard, who spent her life on exactly that, look at you like you're a plague? People who actually save everyone don't leave a trail of the people they've killed to get there. Kai Leng's smile thinned further, into something colder. The crack hadn't opened the way the elusive man had predicted. The boy had looked at the handle held out to him, and seen the trap it was welded to. That's disappointing, Leng said. He hoped you'd come willingly. I told him you were a child, and children have to be shown. And his hand went to the sword. What happened next happened in the space of 4 seconds, and Deku's danger sense screamed through every one of them. Leng was fast, genuinely, frighteningly fast, augmented past the human ceiling, and his opening move was not aimed at Deku at all. It was aimed at the dock gantry Deku had been holding up an hour before, now packed with a fresh wave of refugees, a cheap and vicious pivot to force the boy who wouldn't leave anyone behind to choose, stop me, or save them, a shaped charge, already thrown, arcing toward the gantry's support, even as Leng lunged for Shepard with the blade. Deku's danger sense caught both threats in the same instant, and his mind, the analyst, the vestiges, the whole braided chorus of him, resolved it faster than thought, because this was the exact kind of impossible arithmetic he had spent his life refusing to accept as impossible. He did not choose. He split. Black Whip lashed out from his right arm, a dozen tendrils of dark energy catching the shaped charge in midair and whipping it up and away, out over the empty plaza where it detonated harmlessly against the sky, while his body, float already engaged, crossed the distance to Shepard and got there half a beat ahead of Leng's blade, his broken and barely healed left arm coming up to catch the sword on the reinforced ceramic of the medgel cast, the impact jarring up to his shoulder, the cast shattering, The refugees on the gantry never even knew how close they'd come. Shepard, blade caught inches from her throat, stared into Kai Leng's shocked face over Deku's interposed arm. "You threw a bomb at 90,000 people," Deku said, very quietly, holding the sword. "To make me choose. That's who you work for. That's the man who's going to save everyone." The green light climbed his veins, and Kai Leng, for the first time, felt the raw scale of what he'd been sent to receive rather than defeat, and understood that the ceiling on his competence, the elusive man had warned him about, was standing directly in front of him, holding his blade like it weighed nothing. "Get off this world. Take your team. Tell him I heard the offer, and the answer is that anyone who spends lives to recruit me has already told me everything I need to know about how he'd spend them after." Kai Leng was a professional, and professionals knew when an operation had failed. He disengaged in a spray of biotic augmented speed, his team laying down covering fire that Garrus answered round for round, and within 90 seconds the Cerberus frigate was breaking atmosphere, and the snare was gone, and Deku stood in the ruined plaza with a shattered cast, and a bruise blooming down his arm, and 90,000 people still, impossibly, alive around him. Then the sky turned red, and the Reaper Vanguard arrived, and the actual fight began. Shepard came up beside him, rifle ready, watching the crimson descent of the Vanguard's lead cruiser. "You could have taken his offer," Shepard said, quiet under the rising howl. The wound Hackett opened, Leng aimed right at it. Most people would have at least wanted to believe it. "I did want to believe it," Deku said. "That was the worst part. That's why I looked at everything else instead of the offer." He flexed his aching arm, watched the med gel flake away, turned to face the falling sky. "My teachers used to say the most dangerous lie is the one that gives you exactly what you want. I've almost died to a couple of those." A tired ghost of a smile. "I'm getting better at spotting them. Slowly, usually right after they hit me." Above, the Reaper Vanguard opened its harvest beam, and the real work, the work of holding an abandoned world against a machine god with 90,000 lives in the balance and no fleet coming, began. And on a station washed in the light of a dying star, the elusive man watched his surgical recruitment collapse into a hurled bomb and a shattered cast. And he did not rage, because rage was for men without patience. He simply noted, with the cold clarity of something being unmade in ways it would never perceive, that the direct approach had failed, and that the boy could not be tricked and could not be taken, which left only the oldest lever of all, not the boy's mind, the people around him, the ones he would not leave behind. Everyone has a handle, the elusive man thought, watching the red tide fall on Naraya. His is simply larger than most. It is the size of a whole galaxy of people he refuses to let die. He tapped Ash into the dark, and a handle that size can be gripped from anywhere. They held Naraya. It cost Deku both arms again, and a rib he felt go on the third hour, and it cost the volunteer pilot her shuttle, and very nearly her life, and it cost Garrus a wound he'd feel for a month. But they held it, long enough. Deku had learned something on that abandoned world that Hackett could have told him, and that he'd needed to learn with his body instead of his ears. That holding a landing zone against a Reaper Vanguard was not a fight you won by being strong. It was a fight you won by being exactly strong enough, in exactly the right place, for exactly long enough, while 90,000 people ran for the ships behind you. He had caught a harvester's cannon. On Naraya he learned to ration himself, to hold a beam here and let a lesser threat through there, to spend his breaking body by the minute the way Hackett spent fleets by the system, because there was, as the old man had said, only one of him. He hated how much it felt like the arithmetic. He did it anyway, and 90,000 people lived who the map had sorted into the dead, and when the last transport broke atmosphere, and Deku finally let full cow gutter out and collapsed against a scorched dock stanchion with his arms in ruins, the vestiges in the back of his mind were quiet, and it was the good kind of quiet, the kind that came after you'd done a hard thing right. It bought him exactly 6 days of believing he was learning to thread the needle. On the 7th day, the elusive man gripped the handle. The colony was called Sedaris Anchorage, and the message reached the Normandy not through Fleet Command, but through a civilian distress relay, garbled and desperate. A mining colony of 60,000 in the terminus reaches, a Reaper detachment inbound, and the part that made Deku go cold, a Cerberus evacuation fleet already on station, broadcasting that it would lift the colony to safety, that no one would be left behind, that all Sedaris Anchorage had to do was cooperate, and threaded through the civilian traffic, on a frequency EDI flagged as a deliberate leak meant to be intercepted, a single tight beam pulse, Deku's translator resolved into a name and a location and nothing else. His name, Sedaris Anchorage's coordinates, an invitation. It's a trap, Shepard said flatly, in the war room, before Deku had finished reading it. It's designed to look exactly like Naraya, so you'll do exactly what you did at Naraya. The elusive man wants you to come running to a world where he's already established control, on his terms, on his ground. He's not evacuating that colony to save it, he's evacuating it to have it. 60,000 hostages and a boy who won't leave them behind, all in one place, all under Cerberus guns. I know, Deku said. Shepard blinked. I know it's a trap, it's obvious. He wants me to come. Deku set the datapad down, and his face had the particular stillness Shepard had learned to associate with the boy, having already made a decision that no argument would move. But Commander, the trap only works because the 60,000 people are real. He's not bluffing about the colony. There is a Reaper detachment inbound. There are 60,000 miners and their families on that rock. Cerberus is really there, and if I don't come, one of two things happens. Either Cerberus lifts them and they spend the rest of their lives as the elusive man's leverage. 60,000 people owned, used, experimented on, whatever he does with the people he saves, or he pulls his fleet the moment he's sure I'm not coming, and lets the Reapers have them, because a dead hostage still proves the point that I abandoned them. He looked up. It's a trap where the bait is 60,000 actual human lives, and he built it that way specifically because he knows I can't treat real people as bait. That's the whole design. He's not attacking my strength, he's attacking the thing I refuse to become. Liara, quiet at the edge of the room, said what everyone was thinking, which means the correct tactical decision is not to go, to recognize the manipulation and refuse to be moved by it, to let the elusive man have this round, because the alternative is walking into a snare built by the smartest, most patient enemy we have, on ground of his choosing. She said it gently because she already knew. That's what the war says. That's what the arithmetic says. 60,000 strangers you've never met, against the one weapon the Reapers fear, delivered into Cerberus' hands. Yes, Deku said. That's exactly what it says. The war room was silent. And this, Shepard understood, watching the boy. This was the real dilemma, the one Hackett had promised the war would hand him, the one no clever splitting of Black Whip and Float could resolve into both. Because at Naraya, he had found a way to refuse the choice by being fast enough, precise enough, enough. Here there was no such trick. Here the choice was total. Go, and walk knowingly into a trap designed by an enemy who had already proven he'd throw a bomb at 90,000 people to spring it. Risk becoming the very hostage that let the elusive man do God knew what. Remove the one variable the Reapers couldn't turn from the board entirely. Or don't go, and leave 60,000 people, real people, kids among them, to Cerberus, or to the Reapers, and in doing so become, for the first time, a man who left people behind, because the math said so. Become, in that single choice, exactly what he'd told Hackett he could never let himself be. There was no split. There was no both. The elusive man had built a machine with no third door, and he had built it precisely because he understood Deku better than Deku was comfortable being understood. Talk me out of it, Deku said quietly, to the room, to Shepard. Please, if any of you can, because I've run it every way I know how, and every path where I don't go ends with me becoming the thing I promised myself I'd never be, and I need someone smarter than me to find the path I can't see, because the only one I can find is the one he wants me to take. And Shepard, Commander Shepard, who had made this exact kind of choice 100 times, who had left worlds to burn and lived with it, who knew better than anyone in the galaxy the cold necessity of the sacrifice play, opened her mouth to give the correct tactical answer, the don't go, it's a trap. 60,000 is fewer than the whole galaxy you protect by staying free. Opened her mouth to say the thing the war had taught her, and couldn't. Because she had watched this boy catch a Reaper's cannon and weep. Because she had watched him refuse a snare aimed at his deepest wound. and hurl a bomb away from 90,000 strangers without choosing. Because in 3 years of a war that had ground every principle she'd ever held down to grim arithmetic, she had met exactly one person who still believed the arithmetic could be refused. And she had come, slowly, over Tirana Reach and Naraya, and a dozen conversations, to understand that his refusal was not naivety. It was the single most important thing in the galaxy. It was the thing the Reapers feared. And if she talked him out of it, if she used her authority and her experience and her hard-won cynicism to convince him to leave 60,000 people to die for sound tactical reasons, she would not be saving the weapon. She would be turning it. She would be doing to him, with kindness and good sense, exactly what Harbinger couldn't do with 50,000 years of indoctrination, making him accept the math, making him just another gun, winning the elusive man's real objective for him. "I can't," Shepard said. Deku looked at her. "I can't talk you out of it," Shepard said, and something in her chest, that had been armored over for 3 years, cracked clean through. "Because the day I convince you to leave 60,000 people to die for good tactical reasons is the day I've done the Reaper's work for them. You're right, it's a trap. It's a trap I can see every wire of, and you have to walk into it anyway, because the alternative is worse than losing you. It's keeping you, and turning you into me." She stood straight. "So we don't refuse the trap. We spring it wrong. He built it assuming you'd come alone, or come with me and my little squad, running and desperate the way you came to Naraya. He built it around the boy who won't leave people behind." A hard light came into her eyes, the thing that had made her Commander Shepard. He forgot that the boy who won't leave people behind has, standing next to him, someone who spent 3 years learning to beat the elusive man at exactly this game. You're going into that trap, but you're not going in as bait. You're going in as the two of us, with a real plan, to take his hostages away from him and hand him back his own snare. Deku stared at her, and then, slowly, the exhaustion and the dread lifted off his face, replaced by something Shepard hadn't seen there since Tirana Reach. Not relief, exactly, but the fierce clarity of a person who had been carrying an impossible choice alone and had just discovered he wasn't alone in it. "You'd walk into a trap built by the man who murdered your people," Deku said quietly, "on ground of his choosing, for 60,000 strangers, because I can't make myself leave them." "No," Shepard said. "I'd walk into it because you're right, and I stopped being able to tell myself you were wrong somewhere over Naraya, and a galaxy that turns a boy like you into a man like me isn't a galaxy worth saving anyway." She keyed the comm. "Joker, plot a course for Sedaris Anchorage, quiet approach, and get me EDI, Garrus, and Liara in the war room in 5. We're going to go spring a trap." A grim, real smile. "And Midoriya, you were right about one more thing, about the handle. He's not trying to break your mind. He's trying to grip you by the people you love." The smile sharpened. "So let's teach him what happens when you grab a live wire." Sedaris Anchorage was a scar of a colony, a mining settlement bored into the flank of a dead moon, and by the time the Normandy came in dark along the Terminator line, 3 things were true at once, and each of them was worse than the last. The first was that the Cerberus evacuation fleet was real, and it was efficient, and it had already begun loading the colonists, which meant the elusive man's leverage was assembling itself in real time. 60,000 people filing into transports that would carry them not to safety, but into an account he intended to spend. The second was that the Reaper detachment was real, and closer than the distress relay had claimed. Not a vanguard, not a harvester, but a genuine capital-class Reaper, a 2-kilometer machine god of the true line, dropping out of FTL at the system's edge, with a fleet of lesser Reaper forms wheeling around it like carrion birds around a mountain. And the third truth, the one that reframed the other 2. EDI spoke aloud in the war room as the Normandy crept toward the moon. "Commander, the Reaper's approach vector and the Cerberus fleet's loading schedule are correlated. The elusive man is not evacuating ahead of the Reaper. He is loading colonists while the Reaper closes, timing his lift to the last possible moment." A pause. "He has calculated that Midoriya will arrive, and that Midoriya will refuse to let either the Reaper or Cerberus take these people, and that Midoriya will therefore be forced to fight a capital Reaper to protect the very transport Cerberus controls. He has arranged for the boy to defend his cage." Deku absorbed this the way he absorbed everything. Fast, whole, the analyst spinning it out to its conclusion before EDI had finished. "He's using the Reaper," he said. "He doesn't just want me here. He wants me fighting here, spending myself against a capital Reaper, while his transports fill up. If I win, he lifts the colonists out from under me, and I've saved them straight into his hands. If I lose..." He stopped. "If you lose, the Reaper takes the colony, and the elusive man loses nothing but a snare he was willing to lose," Liara finished quietly. "He's built a trap where every outcome feeds him. Except he's made the same mistake he made at Naraya," Shepard said. She had the war room's tactical display up, the three-body problem of it rendered in cold light. Cerberus fleet, Reaper detachment, one dead moon full of people. He built the whole thing around Midoriya alone, around the boy's compulsion, treated as a lever with no mind behind it. He keeps forgetting there's a strategist attached to the compulsion. 2 of them now. She looked up. Here's what he didn't account for. He needs those colonists alive and loaded to have leverage. That's his weakness. He can't let the Reaper have them. A dead colony is worthless to him. So the moment things go wrong for Cerberus, the elusive man's own interest forces him to protect those transports. His leverage and his trap are the same 60,000 people. We don't fight him for them. We make the situation bad enough that he has to save them, and then we take them at the handoff. What followed was the kind of plan that only worked once, against an enemy who thought he'd already won. Deku went first, and he went loud, because the plan required the elusive man to believe the trap was working exactly as designed. He dropped from the Normandy's belly onto the colony's surface, in full view of the Cerberus fleet's sensors. Full cowl blazing green across the dead moon dark, and he did the thing the elusive man had built the entire snare to make him do. He turned to face the descending Reaper, planted himself between the machine god and the colony, and fought. And here the story must be honest, the way the galaxy is honest, because this was not Tirana Reach, and it was not a harvester. This was a capital Reaper of the true line, and Deku learned in the first 90 seconds what Hackett had tried to tell him in words, that there were things in this galaxy that his strength, however uncatalogued, however vast, was simply not scaled to beat. He could hurt it. That alone was more than most fleets managed. A 100% Detroit smash into the Reaper's forward limb joint buckled 2 meters of armor that a cruiser's spinal gun would have splashed off of, and the machine god's bonehorn cry pitched, for the first time, into something that was almost surprise. But hurting it and beating it were different countries. The Reaper was 2 kilometers of layered redundancy and ancient malice. It did not have a heart to punch or a head to remove. It fought with a patience and a totality that no single body, however impossible, could overcome. Its beam weapons swept the surface in kilometer-wide arcs. Its lesser forms swarmed, and when Deku caught its main gun, the way he'd caught the harvesters, arms crossed, will braced, the dead chorus roaring behind his eyes, he held it, and holding it nearly killed him, and it cost the Reaper nothing to fire again. He was not going to beat it. He understood that with total clarity somewhere in the second minute, both arms already screaming, and the understanding did not stop him, because beating it had never been the plan. Holding it was the plan. Holding it, and being seen to hold it, long enough for the second and third moves. Because while the whole system's attention, Cerberus's, the Reapers, 60,000 terrified colonists, was fixed on the impossible sight of a single boy trading blows with a machine god, the Normandy was doing what the Normandy did best, running dark and fast and unnoticed along the moon's shadow. And Liara, who was not only a scientist but the shadow broker, who commanded an information network that reached into places even the elusive man's did not, was doing the quiet violence she was best at, not shooting, but talking, flooding the Cerberus fleet's own comms with the truth of what they were part of. That their leader was timing an evacuation to a Reaper's arrival, using the people they were loading as bait. That the boy dying on the surface below them to buy those people time was doing the thing Cerberus claimed to stand for, while Cerberus itself sat in orbit and watched, waiting to profit. She did not order them to defect. She simply made it impossible for them not to see. And Cerberus troopers, whatever the elusive man had become, were still, most of them, human beings who had joined because they were told it meant saving humanity, and enough of them, watching a boy break his own body against a god to save the people they'd been ordered to hold as hostages, made a choice their masters had not accounted for. Commander, EDI's voice, tight with something like wonder. The Cerberus fleet is fragmenting. Approximately 40% of vessels are breaking from the loading pattern. They are, Commander, they are moving to evacuate the colonists for real, to lift them clear rather than hold them. The elusive man is losing operational control of his own fleet. It was the crack the whole plan turned on, and Shepard drove the Normandy straight through it. In the chaos of a splintering Cerberus fleet, a boy holding a Reaper at bay, and 60,000 colonists surging toward whatever ship would take them, the Normandy seized the loading platforms the wavering Cerberus vessels abandoned, and Shepard and Garrus and a squad of Alliance Marines took control of the evacuation on the ground. No longer a hostage lift, but a real one, transports filling and burning for orbit under Alliance colors, while the defecting Cerberus ships covered them, and the loyalist Cerberus ships, suddenly outnumbered and outmaneuvered, found that their leverage had evaporated in their hands. The elusive man, watching from his station, saw his perfect machine come apart along the one seam he had refused to believe was there, that the people he treated as assets to be spent could look at the boy and decide, for themselves, to be something better. He had built a trap around a lever. He had forgotten the lever was a person, and that people, faced with an example of who they might be, sometimes chose to become it. He gave the order to salvage what he could, and withdraw, and it was the correct order, and it was a defeat, and he knew it. But the Reaper did not withdraw. The Reaper had no leverage to lose, and no interest to protect. It had only the harvest, and a boy standing between it and 60,000 fleeing lives, and it simply kept killing. And Deku, both arms shattered, a rib gone, full cowl guttering, watched the last transports claw for orbit and knew he had done it. The colony was lifting. The people were saved. The trap had been sprung backward, and knew, in the same moment, that he had spent everything to do it, and that the machine god above him was not finished, and was now turning the whole of its ancient attention onto the one small broken thing that had cost it its harvest. The Reaper's main gun charged. Deku raised his ruined arms, because that was what he did, and knew, distantly, that this time there was nothing left to catch it with. And the Normandy came screaming down out of the dark between him and the beam, EDI throwing every kinetic barrier the frigate had into the gap. Shepard's voice in his ear. "Get up here now. That's an order. The people are safe. Your job is done. Don't you dare die on a rock for nothing." And Deku, for once, for the first time, did the thing the war had been trying to teach him. He broke off. He let Float carry his broken body up through the Normandy's open bay, as the frigate hauled hard for the relay, the Reaper's beam scoring the dark where he'd stood, and 60,000 people ahead of them all, alive, in the ships, going home. He collapsed on the deck of the cargo bay, and Chakwas was already running toward him, and above him through the closing bay doors he caught one last glimpse of the capital Reaper, denied, receding, and its bone-horn cry rolled across the void one final time, and this time Deku's translator, or his exhausted mind, or something older listening from very far away, put words to it that had never been in any of its cries before. "Not we see you. Not errors are corrected. We do not understand you. We will." "They're safe," Deku mumbled, before the dark took him. 60,000. We got them. We got them all. You got them all," Shepard said, kneeling in the boy's blood on the deck of her ship, and found that her face was wet and could not remember the last time that had happened. "Rest, kid. You broke his machine and you didn't leave anyone behind and you didn't die doing it. First time for all three." She looked up, through the closing doors, at the receding shape of the thing that had said it would understand him. "Now let's get you home before something worse comes to try." They gave him 9 days to heal, and on the 10th, Harbinger came for him. Not with a fleet. That was the first wrongness, the thing that told Shepard, the moment the alert came in, that this was something the war had no protocol for. A single Reaper, the capital class from Sedaris Anchorage, or one exactly like it, EDI could not be certain, dropped out of dark space at the edge of the system where the Fifth Fleet had gathered to rearm, and it did not advance on the fleet. It did not fire. It took up a station just inside the relay's approach, 2 kilometers of ancient machine hanging motionless against the stars, and it broadcast, on every frequency the galaxy possessed, and several it did not. in a voice that was not the harvester's borrowed cry, but the thing itself, old beyond the reckoning of any living species. The variable. Come, alone or not alone, it is irrelevant. I do not wish to harvest you. I wish to understand you. This has not been true of anything in 10,000 cycles. Come. The whole fleet went to battle stations. Hackett's voice on the command channel was iron. Hold position. Do not engage. A single Reaper against the Fifth Fleet was a fight they might survive, but not one they'd start on the enemy's invitation. And in the Normandy's war room, 60 admirals worth of doctrine collided with the fact that the machine god had asked for a conversation. It's a trap, Garrus said, because someone had to. It's not, Deku said. He was standing, barely, the ribs still knitting, the arms freshly out of casts, and his eyes were fixed on the tactical display, on the motionless Reaper, and his face had gone very still and very certain. I mean, it might be, but that's not why it's here. I can feel it. He touched his own chest, over the sternum, where the green light lived. Since Sideris, there's been a pressure, something reaching for me, not to break me, to read me. It's been trying to understand me for 9 days and it can't do it from a distance, and it hates that. And this is what a thing that has never once in 50,000 years failed to understand something does when it finally can't. He looked up. It came to ask, because I'm the first thing it's ever met that it had to ask. Shepard studied him. And you want to go? I have to go. Deku said it simply. Not because it asked. Because this is the whole thing, Commander. This is why I'm here. The Reapers run the galaxy on one belief, that any mind can be broken and turned, that no will survives the harvest, that resistance is just a variation on surrender that hasn't finished yet. It's not just their weapon. Liara said it. EDI said it. It's their religion. It's the thing that lets them do this for 50,000 years and call it mercy. He set his jaw, and it just admitted, to the whole galaxy, on every frequency, that it met a will it couldn't turn, that its religion has an exception. If I go down there and I show it, if I make it understand exactly why it can't have me, then it's not a secret anymore. It's a crack in the foundation of the entire cycle. Every species fighting this war deserves to know the Reapers can be wrong about something. I deserve to make it look at me and know it's wrong. And if it's lying, Shepard asked, if it's here to kill you or take you? Deku almost smiled. Then it finds out what a lot of very clever people have found out, that I'm at my most dangerous when someone I don't trust tells me I don't have a choice. He met her eyes. But I'm telling you first. That was the deal. I'm telling you, and I'm going, and I'd like the Normandy watching my back. Not to fight it, you can't fight it, but so that whatever happens down there, someone I trust sees it. And the galaxy hears the truth of it from you, and not from the thing that ate 1,000 civilizations. Hackett, when Shepard relayed it, was silent for a long time on the command channel. Then, the boy wants to go argue theology with a Reaper. A pause. God help me. I think he might be the only one who can. Normandy, you're cleared to shadow. The fleet holds. If this goes wrong, you run. You don't die trying to pull him out of a capital Reaper's grip. That's an order I'll make him keep, even if he won't keep it himself. The old man's voice roughened. Midoriya, you told me you hoped the war never took your principle from you. Go make the enemy afraid of it. That's the best use of it I can think of. So Deku went down alone into the dark between the fleet and the Reaper. Float carrying him across the void in a hard suit Chakwas had all but bolted onto his half-healed body, and the Normandy hung back at the edge of engagement range with every sensor it had drinking in the meeting, and the machine god waited, motionless, for the variable to arrive. He came to rest before its central eye, a dark well of ancient light, the size of a dreadnought's hull, a single small figure against a 2-kilometer god, and for a moment neither of them did anything at all. Then Harbinger spoke, and this close its voice was not sound but presence, a weight that pressed on the mind directly, the psychic pressure of a thing so vast that merely being attended to by it felt like standing under a collapsing sky. I have touched your mind, Harbinger said, at Tirana Reach. Across the dark, after. I reached for the seam that every will possesses, the isolation that every mind fears, the fatigue that erodes all resistance given time. These are not tactics to me. They are the fundamental nature of organic consciousness. observed across a span you cannot comprehend. Every mind is alone. Every mind can be worn to nothing. This is the axiom upon which the harvest rests. It is why the cycle is not cruelty but order. Because organic will, left to itself, produces only chaos and suffering. And we preserve what is worth preserving from the wreckage of your inevitable failure. The eyes seem to focus, to lean. I reached into you, and I found that you are not alone. And the axiom failed. I do not understand this. I have not failed to understand anything in longer than your species has existed. Explain it to me. What are you? That the foundation of 50,000 years does not apply? And Deku, Izuku Midoriya, quirkless boy, ninth holder of One for All, who had wanted his whole life only to be someone who saved people, floated before the oldest and vastest intelligence in the galaxy, and answered it honestly, because honesty had always been the only weapon he fully trusted. You reached into me looking for one person alone, he said, and you're right. One person alone can be broken. I know that. I've been that. There was a time I had nothing, no power, no place, and I was as alone as anyone's ever been. And if you'd reached into that kid, you'd have found exactly the seam you were looking for. His voice was steady, carrying across the void on the suit's channel, and the Normandy recorded every word. But then someone gave me something. Not just power. He gave me himself. One for All isn't a weapon that got passed to me. It's people. 8 of them, who each carried it, and each poured their whole life into it, and each chose, when they died, to stay. To hold up whoever came next. They're in here. He touched his chest again. When you reached for the seam, 8 dead people closed over it. When you tried to isolate me, I wasn't isolated. Because I am never isolated. That's the whole thing you don't understand. You think a will is a single point you can surround. Mine is a chorus. You can't wear down one voice when 8 others answer. You can't whisper a mind into surrender when the mind talks back with 9 mouths. A chain of the dead, Harbinger said, and there was something in the vast voice that might, in a smaller thing, have been the effort to grasp a shape it had no hands for. Preserved will, transmitted across death, accumulating. We do this. We preserve the essence of harvested species in our own forms. If we are, ourselves, chains of the dead, why does yours resist what ours enforces? Because you take, Deku said, and now something fierce came into his voice. The thing that had scared a harvester, the thing that no amount of exhaustion had ever been able to quiet. You harvest. You break a species down and store what you think is worth keeping and throw the rest away. And you call it mercy. And the thing you keep is a thing, a pattern, a specimen in a jar. You've been doing it so long you actually believe that's what preserving a people means. He leaned forward in the void. One for All is the opposite. Nobody took it. Every single person who carried it gave it, chose to hand it on, chose to stay and help, chose it freely, every time, for over a century. That's the difference you can't measure. You're a chain forged by force. I'm a chain forged by choice. And a will that's held up by people who chose to hold it up doesn't have a seam, because there's nothing to isolate. Take away one voice, and the choice that made the chain is still there in all the others. You've spent 50,000 years learning to break wills that stand alone. You have never once met a will that 100 years of freely given love was poured into. That's your error. That's the thing that isn't in your catalog. His voice dropped, and it was almost gentle. You can't turn me because I was never trying to hold on alone. I let go a long time ago, and let them hold me up, and you don't have anything that reaches that. The Reaper was silent. It was silent for a long time. Long enough that on the Normandy, Shepard's hand tightened on the console, and Hackett's fleet held its breath across a whole system, and Liara, listening, understood that she was witnessing something that had perhaps never happened in the entire history of the current cycle. A Reaper, thinking, with no certainty at the end of the thought. And when Harbinger spoke again, the vast voice had changed. The glacial totality was still there, but under it, for the first time, ran something that had no name in the Reaper's deep grammar, because it had never before been needed. You have shown me a thing the cycle did not contain, Harbinger said slowly. A will that is not a point but a lattice. A preservation founded on choice rather than force. If this can exist, if organic consciousness can produce a structure of will that our harvest cannot dissolve, then the axiom is not an axiom. And if the axiom is not an axiom, then the harvest is not order imposed on inevitable failure. It is only one answer. Among others we did not permit to exist. The eye dimmed and brightened, a vast slow pulse. You have introduced doubt into a thing that has not doubted in 10,000 cycles. Do you understand what you have done? You have not defeated me. You could not. But you have made me uncertain, and uncertainty, in a mind as old as mine, propagates. I will carry this back into the dark. I will consider it. And I do not know, for the first time in an eternity, I do not know what I will conclude. The Reaper began to withdraw, its bulk turning toward the relay, and its final words rolled across the void and into the recordings that would, within a day, reach every species fighting the war. You wish to make me look at you and know I was wrong. I have looked. I do not yet concede that I am wrong, but I concede that I might be, and no organic has ever made a Reaper concede that much. Go, variable. Carry your chain of the willing dead. I will carry my doubt. We will both learn what grows from what we carry. And it was gone, folded into dark energy, back toward the deep place where the Reapers waited, and it left behind a fleet that had just watched a boy make a machine god uncertain, and a recording that would do more for the morale of a losing war than any victory of arms, and a single small figure floating in the void with tears freezing on his face inside his helmet, and 8 voices in the back of his mind, quiet and proud, and the first of them saying softly, "That's it, kid. That's the whole reason any of us stayed. You just taught the thing that ends galaxies that it might be wrong about the one thing it was surest of. Nothing it does now will ever be quite as certain again." "Deku," Shepard's voice, in his ear, rough. "You did it. The whole fleet heard. The whole galaxy's about to hear. You made a Reaper doubt. A breath. Come home." "Coming home," Deku whispered, and let Float carry his broken, weeping, unbroken self back toward the light of the fleet. And behind him, in the dark, something ancient and vast turned a fraction of its infinite attention inward, onto a doubt it could not resolve. And for the first time in the history of the harvest, the cycle did not know what it would do next. The war did not end. That was the thing Deku had to make his peace with in the weeks that followed. And it was the vestiges who helped him do it. The 8 of them, patient in the quiet hours, reminding him that no single act had ever ended anything, that even All Might's greatest victory had only ever bought the next fight, that the point was never to end it alone, but to change what everyone believed was possible, and then let a whole galaxy carry it forward. The Reaper harvest ground on. Worlds still fell. Hackett still made his terrible arithmetic every morning, and Deku still fought him on it, world by world, and still went anyway, and still told him first. None of that stopped. But something underneath it had shifted, and the shift spread the way Harbinger had feared it would. The recording got out. Liara made sure of that. The Shadow Brokers network carrying it to every species in the war within a day. Uncut. A boy from nowhere making a Reaper concede that it might be wrong. And it did what no fleet victory had done in 3 years. It gave the galaxy back the one thing the Reapers had spent 50,000 years harvesting out of every cycle, before it ever came to the harvesting of bodies. Hope that the arithmetic could be refused, that the machine gods were not gods, that inevitability was a story the enemy told, and stories could be broken. Turian legions played the recording before deployments. Krogan clans that had never agreed on anything agreed that the green-lit boy had the right of it. Asari matriarchs who had watched 3 years of grinding loss found, in the sound of a Reaper saying "I might be wrong," a reason to believe the crucible might matter after all. Deku had wanted to save everyone. He was learning, slowly, painfully, with the Vestiges' help and Shepard's and Hackett's grim mercy, that he couldn't, that there was one of him and a galaxy of falling worlds, and no amount of will closed that gap. But he had done something he hadn't set out to do, and hadn't understood until he saw it spreading. He had made the idea of him something that could be everywhere at once, in a way his body never could. 60,000 on Sedaris, 90,000 on Naraya. Those were the ones his hands had reached. But the recording, the doubt he'd put into the enemy's own mouth, that reached everyone. That was the thing that scaled. The elusive man never got his handle. He tried, in the weeks after. Subtler approaches, deniable ones, always aimed at the people around the boy rather than the boy himself. Each one failed, because Deku had learned to see them, and because the people around him had, one by one, chosen him over the elusive man's arithmetic, the way the Cerberus defectors had over Sedaris' anchorage. In the end, the elusive man was left with the same discovery Harbinger had made, and refused for longer to accept that a will forged by choice could not be gripped by force, and that the boy's handle, the whole galaxy of people he refused to leave behind, was not a weakness to seize, but a strength that grew every time it was reached for. The man with the glowing eyes went back to his dying star and his slow unmaking, one lever short of the war, and did not understand, and never would, that he had lost the moment he decided a boy who wouldn't spend lives could be spent. And Harbinger carried its doubt into the dark, and what grew from it, no one in the galaxy yet knew. On the eve of the fleet's next great push, the drive toward the Crucible, the beginning of the war's true endgame, Shepard found Deku on the Normandy's observation deck, watching the stars streak past, his arms finally, fully healed, the green light quiet under his skin. "Hackett wants you at the front for the push," she said, coming to stand beside him, not as a soldier, as a symbol, the boy who made a Reaper doubt, standing with the fleet when it matters most. He thinks it'll be worth 3 dreadnoughts in morale alone. A pause. "You don't have to. You've done more than anyone had a right to ask." "I'll be there," Deku said. He watched the stars, but not as a symbol, as one more person holding the line. "That's all I ever wanted to be, honestly. Someone who shows up." He was quiet a moment. "I still don't know how I got here, Commander. What that rift was, whether it was really the Reaper's dark energy stuff or something else, whether it can happen again, whether it can send me back." His voice caught, just slightly, on the last word, and Shepard understood, in it, the whole of what the boy had been carrying alongside everything else, that somewhere on the other side of an impossible tier in space was a home, and a fight he'd been pulled out of mid-leap, and people who did not know if he was alive. "Liara's working on it," Shepard said gently. "The dark energy signature. If there's a way to read the rift, she'll find it. And if there's a way back, I know." Deku smiled, tired and real. "And when she finds it, I'll have the worst decision of my life to make. Because there are people back home I'd tear the galaxy apart to reach. And there are people here I can't stand the thought of leaving in the middle of this." He shook his head. "But that's later. That's a problem for when there's a door. Right now there's a war, and a push, and a line to hold." He looked at Shepard, and the fierce quiet certainty was there, the thing that had scared a harvester and made a god doubt. "So, let's go hold it. All of us. As long as we can. Everyone who's still standing." Shepard put a hand on his shoulder, the boy who caught a Reaper's cannon and wept, who refused the arithmetic and never quite beat it and changed everything anyway. And for the first time in 3 years of a war she had never once believed she would survive, Commander Shepard felt something she'd almost forgotten the shape of. "Yeah," she said. "Let's go hold it." The war would take another year. There would be more falling worlds, and more terrible mornings, and the Crucible's final choice waiting at the end of all of it, and the boy would be there for as much of it as his body could bear, holding lines, refusing arithmetic, saving the ones his hands could reach, and inspiring the salvation of 10,000 more he'd never meet. Whether the rift ever opened him a door home, whether he took it or stayed, whether the doubt he planted in Harbinger grew into something that cracked the cycle wide, or was crushed back down into 50,000 more years of harvest, those were stories still being written, out past the relay, in the dark where the Reapers reconsidered, and a boy from nowhere kept showing up. But this much the galaxy already knew, and would not unlearn, that a machine god had said I might be wrong, and a boy had made it true, that the arithmetic could be refused, that a chain forged by choice held where a chain forged by force could not, and that somewhere in a losing war hope had come back, not as a weapon, not as a fleet, but as a green-lit kid who wouldn't leave anyone behind, and who had taught an entire galaxy that neither should they. Harbinger carried its doubt into the deep. Deku carried his 8 willing dead toward the front, and the cycle, for the first time in 10,000 turnings, did not know how it would end.